November 4th of 2009, just 1 week before the iconic Modern Warfare 2 came out, Activision, well, technically Activision Value, decided to release a game by the name of Jurassic the Hunted, an obscure first-person shooter where your enemies are, you guessed it, dinosaurs. This game would come out a year after the release of the Turok reboot that flopped majorly, which is a shame because I actually enjoyed every single Turok game prior to it. There's very few dinosaur games here on the Xbox 360 or the PS3. I think the only other shooters is that Carnivore's dinosaur hunting game, and I don't believe it did all that well either. Jurassic the Hunted was developed by a company that I'm all too familiar with, Cauldron Ltd. We don't exactly have the best history together. I've reviewed, I've played plenty of games by them, and they've all been terrible. The only exception was Soldier of Fortune Payback, a game so buggy and visually broken, it turned into a game that I couldn't stop myself from laughing the more I played it. It's no secret that Jurassic the Hunted is a budget game that was only released in the US for the price of $39.99 for the PS3, Nintendo Wii, and 360 versions of the game, while the PS2 release was set at a lower price of $29.99. But this doesn't necessarily mean that Jurassic the Hunted is going to be a bad game, despite Cauldron's piss-poor track record. Maybe they pulled a rabbit out of their hat. Ugh, who am I kidding? The game did horribly. It got mediocre to poor scores generally from the critics, and it would be the final first-person shooter game that Cauldron would ever make. Well, unless you count their Cabela's games, which I guess were borderline shooters with very, very little actual hunting elements to them, but you get my point. The story is riveting. You see, you play as a guy named Craig Dillon, who I guess is ex-military, and you're tagged along with a former Navy SEAL friend, goes by the name of Rock, and Sabrina, who's a scientist. I guess for some reason, you wind up traveling to the Bermuda Triangle in search of Sabrina's father, who is a doctor? You get caught into a storm, and all of a sudden, your crew gets zapped by some form of lightning vortex portal thing, bringing you to a prehistoric island in an alternate universe that was created by the vortex in the Bermuda Triangle or something. If that sounds dumb to you, it's because it is. Just watch this cutscene for yourself. It really is a thing of beauty.
Repeat, we are going down!
Don't worry, it's real easy. You just jump and scream.
Yeah, then it just starts right into the game, with no other introduction. With dinosaurs that just randomly pop out of nowhere due to, I guess, the vortex grabbing them and magically placing them in your location throughout the entire game. I guess because Bermuda Triangle? Yeah, the Bermuda Triangle is the explanation for most things that happen in the game.
It looks like a dinosaur. There's got to be a logical explanation. Pull it together, Dylan.
I mean, there isn't, but at least the game is self-aware. I'm actually kind of surprised the graphics aren't even that bad. I was expecting much worse from it, especially since it's coming from Cauldron, but if I'm going to be completely honest, it's actually fine. Although the more I played it, the more I kept thinking that Jurassic looked exactly like a reskinned version of Soldier of Fortune Payback with better clarity and a higher saturation to the colors. The dinosaurs also look pretty good, and there's quite a few of them that you end up coming across. The way they move is, I guess, halfway decent. Not a whole lot to complain about in that regard, except when we talk about the AI in due time. Then we have the character models. Well, cutscenes, they look alright, dated as all hell, but whatever. In-game is a completely different story. It's obvious that no sort of motion capture or any sort of work went into the whole facial structure of the character models when they speak, let alone when they react. The way everyone moves during cutscenes is unbelievably wooden and unnatural, and the facial expressions never change no matter what is going on. It's entirely robotic, and it's absolutely hilarious to watch.
Been pinned down ever since.
While I distract Spike, you run as fast as you can west of here towards the cliffs. I'll radio ahead, let Rock and your dad know you're coming. Ready? Hey, Spike! Come on, boy! Come here, you big piece of overgrown...
Why is Dylan running like that? Who knows? Moving on. You know what I just noticed? This is one of the very few games I've played, at least in recent memory, that doesn't have any sort of option for subtitles. They just don't exist in Jurassic. That's weird. I guess they couldn't be bothered? Oh, the acting. It would be criminal for me not to bring up the obvious here. Okay, so to the common individual, they might go as far as to say it's one of the worst voice acting in any game of all time. And if I had not played some of the shit I have in the past, I would probably agree with you. It's dreadful. Me heavily intoxicated with no sleep for like a week or two could probably act out the lines in this game for all the characters better than the people who actually did the voice work here. It's not painfully bad so much as it is laughably bad. The sound design is abysmal. It's like some of the worst I've seen in years. Everything is either far too loud or overly quiet. I don't know what mic they gave the actors to speak in, especially Dylan, but it sounds like shit. It's like the mic was pressed up right up against his mouth, clipping the entire time he speaks. It reminds me of those shit webcam mics from way back in the day.
Trust me, when you fire this game up, your little fucking nuts are gonna start quaking, buddy. Your little nuts are gonna be quaking. You're gonna shoot. You're gonna shoot.
Also, whoever did the whole sound mixing and leveling in the game should get a baseball bat to the cock. Nothing is more off-putting than conversations where one person's volume is higher than the other's. Worse is when, for some reason, the same character's volume just changes every other sentence. How exactly do you not catch something like this? I feel like it's impossible not to notice.
German submarine U-1226, missing since October 1944. It was carrying an experimental device. It is called the Seitlich Turbulent Machine, or Temporal Vortex Engine. As you can probably guess, the experiment was a great success. Here, the wreckage of the U-1226 is in the cave 5 kilometers east of here. If the device can be repaired,
Then we can go home.
I should give credit where credit is due. Whoever did work on the sounds of the dinosaurs in Jurassic the Hunted did a good job. The various noises they make, like the chattering, growling, roaring, all of that sounds totally fine. The controls are good for the most part. Never been a fan of when developers do that thing where the aiming speed up and down moves significantly slower than that of left and right movement, but it's still tolerable. The control scheme is very similar to that of Call of Duty, so if you understand Call of Duty's controls, you'll understand Jurassic's. The only real difference is that this game has a slow-mo feature that activates as you hold down the shoulder button. It also displays the enemy's weak points in case you can't figure out where their heads are. Unfortunately, this is one of those games where if you've played the first couple levels, you've played the entire game. Yeah, you can find new weapons as you progress through each level, and sure, you fight a few new enemies along the way, including oversized, extremely boring scorpions that look like shit. and the pterodactyls that more resemble kites than they actually do pterodactyls. But outside of that, nothing really changes or gets better. Each level plays out more or less the exact same. You keep progressing forward in the game's very bland and very linear level design with plenty of corridor shooter moments, defeating waves upon waves of enemies along the way, maybe a turret sequence, or 7 of them, in a game where there's only 14 levels, insert a few boss fights, and that's really it. There's even a boss fight that takes place on a mounted machine gun for the entire battle. And just when you think it's over, a different T-Rex appears in its place, basically resetting the entire boss fight. Oh, but the T-Rex is orange this time around. Isn't that special? Weirdly enough, this double boss battle takes longer to beat than it does to complete some of the later levels in the game. Oh, but you know what the best part is about how they designed the levels? When you're just walking forward and the level ends. No cutscene, no context or any sort of dialogue, cut to black, loading screen, and boom, new level in a completely different area. Alright, nice. I love that. Great. The game can also be completed in just under 2 to 3 hours. Not that this is anything new for Cauldron, since some of their shooters, like those History Channel ones, can be completed in an hour or sometimes even less. Yes, I'm dead serious on that. Standard with these Cauldron games is the ever recycling of the guns, skins, and sound effects from shooter to shooter. For example, the shotgun is the exact same model from Soldier of Fortune and Secret Service. They reused multiple sound effects and skins from pistols to rifles. So much of the sound effects are reused that I highly doubt that there is one game made by this company that doesn't have some form of recycling from each other. The enemy AI is terrible. You can easily tell that whenever the enemies show up, it's like done in a scripted format in how they appear and how they move. When they do attack, it's beyond predictable, and sometimes they just run into you without actually attacking. It's really bizarre. They even on occasion stop in the middle of charging after you, only to run off in a completely different direction. It's like how in all of those Dynasty Warrior games, you could just run into waves of enemies, and they just stand there not doing a damn thing. The game as a whole is incredibly easy, even to get all the achievements and the Platinum Trophy. Really, you could do it in a matter of a half day tops, and you wouldn't have to really try because it's not a difficult game. In fact, it's one of the easiest shooters I've ever played. Not because you can take a lot of damage, all of it comes down to the poor enemy AI. Most of the time you can get away with shooting while walking backwards or strafing. Maybe you use the game's adrenaline slow motion skill at the same time if you want, but there's no real enemy in the game that is frustrating to take down either. The boss battles are some of the least challenging I've ever played against. Even the last boss battle against Spike, the entire thing boils down to firing at him from a distance and getting out of the way when he does attack. You could very easily beat this boss with one hand tied behind your back. Now, before I move on to the Everybody's a Critic portion, where I go on Metacritic and share some reviews from users and critics alike, there is one more thing I should point out about the gameplay that I think is, well, fascinating. So there are moments in the game where you get yourself into a defend your position type situation. Activision, or whoever, must have thought that because Call of Duty had a whirlwind success with their zombies mode, why not do a similar thing with Jurassic the Hunted? Rebuilding windows, surviving against waves of dinosaurs. Yeah, it happens in this game, but on an extremely basic, shallow level. There is some irony that the fact that Cauldron or Activision must have really loved the idea, because they turned it into their own dedicated survival mode that is separate from the campaign. But unlike in the campaign, it mimics Call of Duty Zombies a little bit more. You get a bigger playing field, you're still able to rebuild windows, but now as the rounds progress, you unlock more weapons, more turrets to use, and an ammo box. That's really all there is to it. You don't open any rooms or turn on any electrical devices. There's no traps of any kind. It's still very bare bones, and I can't imagine many people wanting to play this more than maybe 2 or 3 times because it gets very old mind-numbingly fast. If they did allow you to play this in a multiplayer setting with random people or friends, then I'd be more interested in that, but it's strictly solo only, and that's all I have to say about this whole thing. Ah yes, Metacritic, everyone's go-to for review scores from various publications, other reviewers, and your buddy Jeremy from work that you don't really like, but the only reason you say you do is to just kind of ease the tension there. Alright, so this first one here is... It was created by a user the day after the game came out, and it says, the reason critics are already calling this title the best video game ever, in quotes, graphics 10 on 10, story, sound, fun factor, all 10 out of 10. Few things here. What critic is saying that this is the best game ever made? And if so, ban them from your dinner table, because they are just lying to you. No reputable critic of any kind, even a half-decent one, could ever call Jurassic the Hunted the best or anywhere near close to being one of the best games of all time. That is an outright lie. Also, everything as a 10 on 10 score. Did you get paid for this review? Did you work on the game? What's going on? The Hunter also gave this game a solid 10 out of 10 score, but the review's a bit, how you say, sketchy. This game is about my life, he says, and I helped make it. We made it to be the best game possible, and I think we succeeded. No, you didn't. Yes, a conflict of interest review nonetheless, by allegedly someone who helped make the game. Lovely. Also, a game about your life. You fought dinosaurs at some point in an alternate universe caused by the Bermuda Triangle, huh? Hell yeah, dude. Best game possible. Think we succeeded. Jesus fucking Christ. I'm not going to read off this whole review because it's quite long, but the reviewer scored it at the complete opposite end of the spectrum as a solid 1 out of 10. Jurassic the Hunted was a game my brother picked up for $1, and I really wish he hadn't. I really never heard much about this game or actually ever seen anything about it, so I went into the game expecting a Turok type game. The controls actually feel good, but not enough to save a title. Graphics are very bad, story is phenomenally bad. The VA in this game is easily worse than the voice acting in the PS1 version of Resident Evil 1. This game shouldn't probably even be on the shelves because it's so horrific. For $1, I don't know, dude. I'll play anything for $1. Anyway, yeah, you know, I would agree with most of what this guy is saying, except the whole voice acting being apparently worse than the voice acting in Resident Evil 1. I know people are prone to hyperbole, I get that. Resident Evil 1's acting is terrible, don't get me wrong. It's like a 1 out of 10. Jurassic's is like maybe a 3 if you've had a few beers and maybe a shot of vodka. The publication PSX Extreme gave it a middle-of-the-road 50 out of 100 type score, citing that there's nothing laughably terrible about this effort, but just about everything ranges from mediocre to average, which is painfully obvious within the first few minutes of the game. It's just so meh. I don't know. There's some pretty bad, painfully bad, laughable moments in the cutscenes, the voice acting. Meanwhile, yeah, okay, fine, everything else about the game is very meh. I'll agree with you on that 100%. That, my friends, is Jurassic the Hunted, another game by Cauldron in the books. One thing that people tend to bring up, especially in reviews, is the comparison to Turok. Some even calling it a Turok clone. I can only imagine it's because it's a shooting game featuring dinosaurs as the main enemies. I don't know, that would be like me saying any movie with dinosaurs is a ripoff of Jurassic Park because, you know, dinosaurs and all that. Jurassic the Hunted is not a Turok clone. If it was, it probably would have been a more redeeming quality and a better game than what we got. Instead, it's more of a weird mix of Soldier of Fortune Payback, their Cabela's games, sprinkled with a touch of Call of Duty. Jurassic the Hunted doesn't deserve to be compared to Turok because Turok at one point was considered to be a great series of games, while Jurassic couldn't be farther from that. Despite my and others' harsh criticisms, the game I could see being enjoyable to certain crowds of people, especially to those of the younger crowd that maybe haven't played too many first-person shooters before. I imagine maybe 15 years ago, I would have thought this game was far more enjoyable than I do now in my early 30s. To be fair, I did enjoy it far more than some of the other Cauldron games I've played, but that's like saying I enjoy picking up cat shit over dog shit. They're both shit. One's just worse than the other.
Dylan, you made it. Thank you. You risked your life for me.
You can pay me extra when we get back home. And you owe me a new plane.
Of course. Tell you what, why don't I just write you a check now, and you can cash it in, oh, I don't know, let's say 65 million years from now.
Hey, you knew about this.